Hey there, this is Jason Dunne with Sumo Logic. I'm a product marketing manager here on the security team, and really excited to run through today the cloud security monitoring and analytics solution with on the Sumo Logic continuous intelligence platform. So I'm going to kick things off with just a couple slides. I think there are actually a few folks that were also on for the session yesterday, which is focused specifically around compliance use cases. So hopefully there shouldn't be too much crossover. We'll be talking through the continuous intelligence platform, and the focal point really being today around kind of some of the broader use cases around cloud security monitoring and analytics with Sumo, inclusive of Linux data, AWS data, Windows data. We'll really get into the specifics of what kinds of data sources can be addressed. It's a pretty long list, but yeah, let me just kick things off initially with a couple of slides, and then we can quickly jump into the demo, which will be kind of the lion's share of the time spent today. So yesterday we covered audit and compliance and everything around how do you actually sort of drive and accelerate compliance and posture management within your organization. Today we'll focus around monitoring, detecting, searching, investigating security incidents, with help from threat benchmarking and various analytics tools around that. So hopefully it becomes more clear throughout the scope of the demo, kind of how we can help you to do that in a more tactical sense. But I just want to kind of kick things off with that orientation. And I should call out too that we also have Cloud SIEM and we have Cloud SOAR as two additional core aspects of our Sumo Logic security portfolio. So audit compliance, cloud security monitoring, analytics really exist within the scope of our continuous intelligence platform. Cloud SIEM and Cloud SOAR take a very tactical approach on sort of the investigation and automation orchestration front for each of them. And we have separate dedicated sessions for each of those as well. So with that context in place, so when we think about how our customers are focusing on and thinking about, improving their security posture and the ways in which they may want to utilize security analytics in order to do so, a lot of it's really going to come down to the fact that Sumo Logic itself is very much cloud native, kind of on two fronts, right? So it's that we're cloud native as a platform. It's how we're built in AWS, and it's how we are able to scale up with our customer demands and customer requirements. But then additionally, we're able to bring in a very diverse array of types of data from AWS, Azure, GCP, whether it's firewall, database, identity, access, CDN data, the list goes on. But very all-inclusive as far as the types of cloud data that we can also work with, in addition to our platform being built in the cloud. And then what comes with that in a big way is really the increased visibility or increased monitoring abilities that come with that, of being able to actually look at all of your multi-cloud or on-prem data from one monitoring solution. I think can be really valuable as far as getting that kind of like broader scope, and then being able to dig in deeper on the analytics front. So yeah, as far as security focused analytics goes, I think some of our competitors take a little bit more kind of vanilla or purely open source approach, even in some cases where it's kind of really up to you to decide how you want to tune the use cases according to your requirements. But in the case of Sumo Logic, we very much, just as much as we have a lot of very focused efforts around how do we help our customers on the observability front, we also focused really closely on security use cases and thinking more deeply about what it looks like for security engineering teams or security analysts to actually be able to prioritize and investigate active security incidents as they occur. And we make that available very much out of the box. A little bit of looking into the process. So we won't focus today as much on sort of the collection, but that we touched on it as far as the types of data that can be brought in, analysis for sure, and the ability to analyze and go really deep with parsing, formatting, merging, a lot of really helpful operators in order to go really granular in that sense. And then, alerts. So generating alerts from those queries, then, being able to save those down or share those out to the right groups, depending on your team requirements, and identifying outliers based on that in order to stay on top of incidents. And visualization may be what most people would think of maybe traditionally for Sumo Logic would be sort of the dashboarding functionality within the continuous intelligence platform, and really being able to surface actionable findings by way of that. So just a little bit different lens into what we just discussed so on sort of the ingest or collection front, it's really about apps, SaaS IT, multi-cloud, on-premise, all of these for here. All of these for data types of data sources can be brought in. We'll get into some specifics of what that would look like. The platform itself can be utilized for security monitoring or for security analytics in some combination. Security monitoring really kind of giving you the broader strokes in a dashboard, security analytics being more focused around sort of a specific query or going more granular with your search after you've already assessed the overall threat landscape. And because of that ability to really monitor and analyze in a more granular way, especially I'd say for security analytics, having that granularity of kind of device level, IP level, network level really lets you kind of sort of dive in or pivot out on the right entity and better understand what's happening within that. So we'll spend time in the demo, but I just want to call out, here we really think about the ability to generate actionable security insights, prioritize threats, perform deep investigations. Can you also even do accelerated response patterns as necessary? Although SOAR traditionally would be more what that's designed for, certainly it is something that we have the capability to offer within the core platform. And when we talk about really prioritization of threats, it's about surfacing the most relevant threats based on these kind of outlier patterns that I'll show you in a moment within the demo, going deep into investigation within at the query level by pivoting out from a panel, and then response for sure, the ability to actually take an action, whether it's from within your Slack instance or anywhere that you want to be able to actually like trigger a specific quarantine action. You do have the ability to do that through the dashboard, or you can utilize our SIM or SOAR solution to really kind of dovetail in with your overall response strategy. Okay, so I'll jump into the demo at this stage. Feel free to, by the way, feel free to add any sort of questions that you have that you would like to see kind of addressed. And I'm also just going to sort of tack on a couple of resources that you can navigate to throughout this presentation or at a later date. If you were interested in signing up for the free trial as well, it is a 2-week free trial, although we can extend it sort of as needed. So feel free to visit that URL that I just shared in the chat there of sumologic.com/sign-up. And that allows you to sign up quickly and sort of get a quick sense of the platform, or you can even sort of follow along with the demo as we're running through this and get sort of some data flowing through that. So just a quick lay of the land. So let's jump into the demo at this stage. So quick lay of the land. This is the continuous intelligence platform. When I go to the app catalog, you can see that a lot of this content exists here with the ability to really basically get off and running very quickly and sort of look at the previews, build around that, decide on which is the most relevant for your use case. Once you've decided it makes sense for you, just assign the right source category. So I can just search CloudTrail. Don't see anything specific coming in, but then if I just search AWS, I can maybe navigate to, okay, so here we see CloudTrail/analytics, or just find the specific source categories that make the most sense. You can also wildcard on these. So if you do sort of asterisk CloudTrail asterisk, you would be capturing sort of all CloudTrail data at that point. You have the ability to kind of tune that accordingly, decide from like a sharing collaboration perspective where that exists within the platform as well. So yeah, that gives you a little sense. This is where the content kind of lives, personal versus shared library. And then sort of you can check out sort of recent dashboards as well. So fairly straightforward. The collection is all done from here. You can decide or manage the various types of collectors that you might have set up and decide which are the most relevant. You can adjust field extraction rules, which are what determine whether or not you have a certain field coming into the system. Make adjustments for metrics. We'll spend less time on metrics today, but certainly other sessions of ours will cover that in more detail. And then monitoring as well. So just being able to really set up alert response and have sort of a strategy around that, I think could be really helpful to think about from this panel as well as when you actually go to build it out. So cool. So that's kind of a little bit more on the just quick UX kind of lay of the land of the platform. But let's actually spend some time now in the dashboards themselves. So when we start thinking about, I'm going to run through sort of an Amazon / AWS example, a Linux example, Windows example. We'll spend a little bit of time in each. Also, feel free to chime in on the chat if you think it's if you want to lean a certain direction. We certainly can we can adjust as needed. So in this case, we're looking at Amazon VPC flow data, and in the context of that, we're looking at kind of two different dashboards here. So we see traffic direction monitoring, and then we see accepts and rejects. For each of these, we can decide, like, you know, what is it that we're actually trying to key in on. I think the dashboards generally can lead you in the right direction as far as better understanding what the most relevant sort of findings might be, or sort of threats that need to be addressed. I can actually click out into you know, viewing this in kind of a more zoomed in format if I know where I want to key in on, or I can decide, okay, so when I go and look more closely at kind of the US, I can see pretty quickly that kind of the majority of the hits maybe are coming from sort of the East Coast, and it looks like more generally from I think Northern Virginia as well as New Jersey. If this is as expected and you have either activity that you expect to see from a VPC flow perspective in this area or not, this might be something you want to key in on and better understand. Hey, you know, let's say maybe we have an embargo in a certain country and we're not expecting a certain type of activity to occur. That might be something that you want to key in on and better understand from that perspective of what's actually occurring behind the scenes. So just like a little bit more visual approach to kind of navigating something in more of kind of from a geo-mapped perspective. And then when we think about kind of flows rejected by destination port, you can see this is really helpful from a visualization perspective, because we're seeing these various destination ports are called out, and for the most part, bright green or sort of this darker green here is actually the majority or the lion's share of the activity for this particular destination port. And we can actually look over here and see, you know, the specific source device IP that's most responsible. You can visualize this in many ways. It's obviously just a very straightforward tabular format, but in this case, we can see 12.219.43.133 is really responsible for the majority of the rejected traffic. So that may be an IP that you want to actually key in on and better understand. And you would have the option to do that within a template variable, or sometimes called a filter. And then if we do that, we're looking at just data for that particular source device IP. And this is where we can actually kind of do that kind of pivot work that we talked about earlier, of really pivoting out on a specific entity. We see specific destination ASN by TCP destination port, which is kind of telling us maybe what we need to know in order to understand like the type of behavior to expect from this particular IP over you know, in most cases over the last 60 minutes, since these panels are all assigned to 60 minutes, or really the whole dashboard level is at 60 minutes. But in any event, if we go back to kind of the device IP and actually just wildcard that back out, then again, we're really getting the broader strokes here, and we can also investigate deeper, better understand what the accepted VPC flows are, how to really navigate around that and better understand what kind of the rejection patterns are and how that aligns with expectations. So switching gears, sticking within VPC flow, but we can see here, we're looking at the actual traffic direction monitoring. This is giving us a little bit broader look at inbound accepted flows versus rejected flows. In this case, we see, you know, as expected, we see sort of the majority being accepts, but there's quite a bit of rejected traffic as well. The visualization primarily, or is only looking here at accepted flows. And based on that information, I think we're seeing a similar visualization as before. We see some activity on the East Coast of the United States, some kind of further down, sort of looking down into South America. It looks like somewhere in Brazil on sort of the southeast side of that country. So just something that may be just of interest. And again, if these are, we have had situations where customers have said, hey, we have an embargo in a certain country that we're not necessarily doing business in by default. And so we want to better understand. And in most cases, it was a non-issue. It turned out that, you know, a given customer really needed to have a legitimate use for accessing that data from that location. But I think in some cases, it's also really helped to drive an investigation in that perspective. So cool. So let's jump into, let's talk about kind of, I'll switch more to like a kind of OS level data here. So we'll start with Linux, we'll move into Windows. So I also want to call out for this particular dashboard, we're using kind of the Sparkline format with kind of the summary above. And this is a security monitoring overview dashboard. So it's really just trying to give us the broad strokes of really actually specifically, it's mostly about access controls within this, these Linux instances. We see, once again, like these are always kind of predicted outcomes of successful logins versus failed. We see it's 972 failed logins. But at the same time, that looks a little bit high, right? I mean, I think the ratio, without Googling it right now, I would guess is not typically as so high as to have this many failed logins against a 4,000. So kind of a 1 to 5, 1 to 4 ratio. So 20% of the time they're failed logins, and that may fall in line with expectations or not. But if it's falling outside of expectations, it could be indicative of sort of a man-in-the-middle attack or brute force attack or various other types of misaccess that bad actors may be kind of looking to pursue. And so in that case, it may be something you actually want to investigate more deeply. We see accounts created, accounts deleted. I just think all of these operate as their own data points, sort of independently, but you can take the cohesive view. If you weren't anticipating to create this many accounts, or you see unexpected behavior from just usage patterns that you're used to seeing, it may be something that's worth investigating more deeply. So continuing down on sort of the Linux track, here we're looking at security analytics data as opposed to security monitoring. So we are going more granular as opposed to a more broad-based look. But now that we have that kind of more overarching Sparkline view, we can get into the specifics of, in this case, we see over the last 24 hours, kind of the general patterns of active services over time. If I look at this, I think kind of the main takeaways I'm seeing are that SSHD is sort of far and away the most common service to be run out of the 63 that are running in total. And so based on that, sort of when we kind of run down the list and we see like DH client, daemon, user add, smart D shadow, you sort of go down the list and continue. But I think maybe more importantly, because, this is probably as expected, because SSHD is a common service that needs to be run, and it's it almost fronts for a lot of the other services that also need to be run. And so there's kind of this interdependency that we might expect. What I would be more interested in would be like sort of this drop off here, for example, would be something I might want to look at. Maybe it coincides with expected sort of operational schedules, but if not, it might be something to investigate further. And then we can see actually the system stop activity, and we see like the specific destination hosts, which you're able to then pivot out on and make decisions based on those outcomes. You can see the various timelines for each of them. But if we jump ahead kind of to, let's look at basically a more granular version of the first Linux security monitoring dashboard we looked at. In this case, we see privileged activity. So sudo attempt outliers, we see attempts versus failures. Actually, this is closer to the ratio that I might expect to see of 243 failures against 40,000 attempts. Can probably chalk that up to more kind of automated scripts running some of those login processes behind the scenes. But just while we're here too, I'll call out that sudo attempt outliers. If we see these outliers, if we're seeing it on the low end, it may just, probably an indicator of low productivity more than anything, or just a slight step out of the range. But these high outliers may be areas of interest because you're just seeing that many more attempts within a given time period. And I just do want to call out, I think this is always a helpful exercise to see if we're looking at based on these outliers. You can always tune the outliers based on what your requirements are and kind of decide to what extent you actually want to make establish a larger time slice, for example, or adjust as needed. If we run this for 60 minutes time slice, then we're looking at this kind of broader strokes view. Actually, it'd be better to do 30 though, because we're looking at a pretty short time period in the first place. But now we see a little bit more consistency in the data. If we go the other way, so we actually see no outliers because we're just trying to generalize over the last 30 minutes. If we go the other way and go more granular with our time slice, then we're going to see a ton of outliers coming into the system because we're only looking at a very small frame of reference, and then it's kind of falling outside of that based on the time series data. Okay, so if we go back to 5, which seems, actually I think we had it at 15. So if we go back to 15 minutes as kind of where this is tuned to, and that was probably about the right level of granularity. It indicates, a couple of high outliers and a lot more low outliers as well. But if we go down to save this, and we actually go to schedule this search, and we run it for, let's say every 15 minutes, since we're already doing a 15-minute time slice, we can then decide, what are the actual conditions you want to have set. I only want to see it if I see greater than 20 outliers that are showing up within it. I can decide if I want to send this out to email, webhook. Webhook here would be Slack or Microsoft Teams, etc. And then you can make some decisions around that and determine whether or not this is a valuable alert, and actually just tune sort of the subject line and who receives it. And this is kind of the sharing and collaboration aspect of alerting. So these kinds of outliers, I think, can really indicate to you what is the most sort of likely data that you want to consistently be tracking, and then make sort of decisions around that based on what you're finding. So that would just, if you save that down, you're actually generating an alert via the query. So I'm just trying to also give a sense here of what it looks like to kind of navigate between dashboards into panels that are driven by these queries, and then sort of save that down as an alert in order to determine, or in order to have the right thresholds in place and really learn as much as you can in that time. Cool. So we covered this one in a slightly different lens, so I'll probably breeze past this, but just want to call this out. Kind of a little different look here. Actually, we see no outliers because it's all staying within an expected range. Yeah, let's switch into Windows security data here. So security monitoring we're specifically monitoring for critical events. In this case, audit logs tampered, services stopped, ingestion delays over 10 minutes. This is using this honeycomb visualization, which the darker color is basically indicating a higher number of instances of this computer triggering that service to be stopped. We see that, computer EC2, et cetera, in this case is responsible for kind of most of the service stoppages. And so we want to kind of keep that in mind as we navigate and better understand what may be occurring. And then as we look at the specific, we see a little bit of spike in activity on network setup service, sort of around the 1:50 p.m. mark for yesterday. So in this case, that maybe that aligns with expected update schedules, or maybe that's unexpected. But we see fairly consistently see when HTTP web proxy is running in this very kind of even-keeled way that we're anticipating. So it's a sort of stacked bar chart. I think could be a helpful way to actually navigate through that and really make some decisions based on that. And I just want to call out again, like the filters are all here. So if I search for EC2 and copy down this full code, full ID, then I can also just pivot out on that particular computer, and then make some decisions around what the critical events are that I'm seeing. And then audit logs tampered. We're seeing a little bit of a spike in activity. You can actually drill down into error logs, error signatures, and kind of the algorithms beneath that just tune that for you so that you aren't having to sort of guess for yourself what the groupings are for each of them. You can actually tune the query accordingly and actually make some decisions around that. And then staying within Windows security analytics. So we were just looking at, we're looking at security monitoring, which is giving a more broad overview, but security analytics here is going into a more granular perspective. And B, we're looking at Windows updates in particular. So again, this should align with how your internal corporate IT is running their sort of processes, and you want to make sure that there's alignment on that front as far as when you see those types of spikes in activity. I don't see any massive spikes except for maybe around this time period of 2 p.m. And based on that outcome, I think we can imagine that it's a very high likelihood that in this case it's a combination of various updates that are occurring at the same time. So this might be something you would want to corroborate with sort of the internal corp IT team, and also, or just be in sync more generally with what that looks like, and then sort of anticipate together what kind of spikes you might expect to see and sort of account for those. And this is kind of going more to the granular level of like a specific tabular. Okay, we're actually looking at the event ID, computer. And so we're looking at the kind of line at each specific line. But also, I mean, to that end, from a specificity perspective, if we look at these event IDs, and also should call out there are various ways that we could visualize that. I mean, I think in this case, actually, probably an area chart might be a better fit, but the stack bar chart can be a helpful lens as well. If you go to the raw tabular format, it's giving you that data in a very, very kind of raw way as well. But I think if you go to column chart, then you can actually see more easily kind of like the individual services, and you're not trying to kind of visualize it as just on the fly. I also do want to just call out, since we looked at some queries a moment ago, but you can also see here that if we actually shift over, we can see the actual sort of view as raw data. In this case, it's formatted fairly cleanly, so you can actually see, but sometimes it's really just just sort of one line of just a lot of data with no real formatting behind it if it's not in JSON, et cetera. So I just want to give a sense of what, if you do know, and from a security analytics perspective, if you're trying to drill down and you kind of already know what that needle is in a haystack that you're looking for, then I think these various fields will actually indicate to you, it's already removed, it's already been extracted out, and it's already being visualized in a cleaner way. But then you can also look at the very raw data, maybe even make some decisions around how you want to tune field extraction rules based on those requirements. So cool. So I think I know we've covered a lot today. Actually, I've been focusing a lot more on the demo for these sessions than on the slides. So I did blow past some information within the presentation itself. But I do think the core of what you may want to find, which I'd already added to the chat, is basically some combination of these resources of sort of the security analytics overview, quick demo video and run through similar to today, but if you wanted to sort of share it out with teammates as well, security intelligence within Sumo Logic security analytics brief. And then we also have the Sumo Dojo Slack, which allows you to basically be in touch with other customers or employees of Sumo Logic that can help you through specific questions as you kind of set up the demo and kind of navigate to how you want to approach things from that perspective, and also just look at what questions are flowing, kind of similar to a Stack Overflow. So just a couple resources to kind of keep in mind. Feel free to reach out directly to sales@sumologic.com, or you can also sign up for the free trial today and kind of get off to the races from that perspective. So with all that being said, I know I threw a lot out there. Really appreciate everyone joining today. I'll stay on for another minute or two in case there are any, you have any flashes of inspiration for questions that come in sort of at the end here. But yeah, thank you so much for joining, and really excited for you to join us for future sessions as well, whether it's on the topic of security monitoring or Cloud SIEM or Cloud SOAR, or on the observability side. So definitely looking forward to having you learn more, and sort of present any interesting questions that come your way through the process as well. But yeah, I'll stay on mute here for another minute or two, and if no further questions, thanks so much for joining, and have a great rest of the day.